Hey everyone, let's do a quick video on the arteries. And we're actually going to start here with some arteries and some veins. Well, an artery and some veins here. So we have three blood vessels here in this model. We've got three blood vessels, okay? And there are two veins and one artery. So this guy right here, this guy is a vein. I know he is a vein because I can see this and I can see this, and those are valves. Veins have valves to prevent backflow. Backflow happens because veins are low pressure. So this is one of my veins here. That leaves me with two vessels. And what I want to do to distinguish these two vessels is look at the layers, all right? So this orangish layer right here is the tunica interna. So there's the tunica interna right there. And then we have the tunica media here and here. Then we have the tunica externa here and here. Remember, interna is also called intima. Externa is also called adventitia. Now what I want you to notice is the media. The media is a lot thicker right here than it is over here. So this guy is actually my artery, and this guy is also a vein. So the thick tunica media tells me it's an artery. Thinner tunica media tells me it's a vein. The tunica media has to be thick in an artery to deal with the high pressure that's there. All right, let's keep on going. So here I have the actual histological slide. This is an artery. I do see my lumen right here. And then lining the lumen where this green arrow is, that of course would be my tunica interna or intima. Yellow arrow tells me my tunica media, which of course is made of smooth muscle. When it contracts, the vessel vasoconstricts. When it relaxes, the vessel vasodilates. Then on the outside, we've got the tunica externa or adventitia. And that's the connective tissue that is going to bind the artery to neighboring blood vessels, nerves, etc. Okay, cool. So let's look at one more histological slide. In this one, I have a vein up here. So I do have a nice vein right here. In the lumen, I wrote the word vein in the lumen of the vein. Big lumen, small wall. Veins can have small walls because they're low pressure. The fact that they've got big lumens makes them low resistance, which is good because they're low pressure. Again, we can see the green arrow on the tunica interna, yellow on tunica media, and the black arrow on the tunica externa. All right. Let's start doing some blood vessels. Okay, we're doing arteries in this video, so let's do our weird arteries first. Weird artery includes this guy. This is the pulmonary trunk. Weird artery includes this guy. This is my left pulmonary artery. And over here, I've got my right pulmonary artery. And these three are weird because in the model here, the diagram here, they are depicted as being blue. And blue tells us that they're deoxygenated. That says DeO2 if you can read my writing. So those are my weird arteries. Fantastic. What else do I see here? I see my ascending aorta. There's my ascending aorta right there. I see my aortic arch right there. And then I'm going to put a 1 here. I'm going to put a 2 here. There we go. I'm going to put a 3 here. Number 1 is my brachiocephalic artery. Number 2 is my left common carotid artery. Number 3 is my left subclavian artery. So we know those 3 branches of our aortic arch. All right, let's figure out where those guys go. So right here, let's start with my ascending aorta. There's my ascending aorta right there. I'm going to put an A on my aortic arch. And then I've got my descending aorta here. Remember, it's going to have a thoracic portion, which then becomes an abdominal portion. Now, coming off of my thoracic aorta, my descending thoracic aorta, I do see all of these guys right here. Look at all those guys sneaking under the ribs. each of those guys is a posterior intercostal artery, a posterior intercostal artery. Okay, what else do I see here? I do see the three vessels I mentioned earlier coming off of the aortic arch. I do see my brachiocephalic artery. I just put a dot on him. There's my left common carotid, and there's my left subclavian. So brachiocephalic, left common carotid, left subclavian. Brachiocephalic comes up and splits. Brachiocephalic comes up and splits. It gives me this guy. This guy is my right common carotid artery. And it also gives me this guy. This guy is my right subclavian artery. So my left-hand versions of these come off my aortic arch. My right-hand version of these come off my brachiocephalic. Now, coming inferiorly off that subclavian, we've got this guy right here. That's a terrible arrow. Let's do a better. You know what? I'm going to switch to arrow. Let's just do arrow. There we go. This will make a nice arrow. Boom. Yeah. So there's my right internal thoracic artery. Right there. There's my right internal thoracic artery coming down off my right subclavian. And by the way, whatever I do on the right-hand side here now is symmetrical with the left. Coming off my right subclavian artery, I do see some anterior intercostal arteries. Fantastic. Now coming vertically up off my right subclavian, I'm going to have my right vertebral artery. Think about carotid arteries as going to the front, maybe the side of the brain, the eyeballs. Think about vertebral arteries as going to the back of the brain. Okay, if I follow my subclavian artery out, it is going to give rise to my axillary artery. We will see where that goes in a moment. Sweet. Let's keep on going. So, let's start. We're doing the right side here. And we've got our brachiocephalic artery. And then we've got our right subclavian artery. We did our internal thoracic artery. There we go. And we can still see the vertebral arteries sneaking up right there. Now, as the subclavian travels out, the subclavian becomes the axillary. Axillary goes down to the arm. Axillary becomes the brachial. Brachial splits at the level of the front of the elbow, the antecubital fossa. Brachial gives me an artery on the right, which is the radial artery, and an artery, I said on the right. I don't really mean on the right. I mean on the outside. A lateral one, that's the radial artery, and a medial one, that's the ulnar artery. These two guys come together, giving me a nice palmar arch right there. And then I'm going to get metacarpal, and I'm going to get digital arteries as well. So that is my pathway to the arm. Note that if we were doing the left subclavian, right there, on the left side, we do the same thing. The only difference between the right and the left here is that brachiocephalic is on the right, but it's not on the left. All right. Fantastic. You know what? Earlier I did talk about the descending thoracic aorta. I mentioned we got these posterior intercostal arteries. There are other branches that come off the descending thoracic aorta that we just don't see. There are arteries called bronchial arteries that are going to feed the lungs. There are arteries that are called esophageal arteries that feed the esophagus. There are arteries called phrenic arteries that feed the diaphragm. I gotta know that these guys exist and they're coming off my descending thoracic aorta, but I don't need to see them. Okay, fantastic. Let's keep going. So what we got here is more of like a side view. And in this side view, I see my aortic arch right there. I see my brachiocephalic artery right there. And then this guy is my right common carotid. The word common tells me that it is going to split. And when it splits, check out, I got a internal carotid right there. That's my right internal carotid artery. And then I got my right external carotid artery there. Good general rule, internal carotid artery feeding the brain, external carotid artery feeding skull and face. I also see my lovely vertebral artery sneaking up back there through those foramina in those cervical vertebrae, sneaking up to the backside of the brain. All right. Fan-frickin-tastic. If we keep going, I don't know why I got another picture of the same darn thing. Pause it and test yourself on this one. And here is our brain arteries. And like we said in lab, we are going to skip that. Yay. And so now I am done with stuff superior to the diaphragm. I'm going to deal with stuff inferior to the diaphragm. Speaking of the diaphragm, there it is right there. Lovely looking diaphragm. And let's orient ourselves a little bit here. Here's a liver. Here's a spleen. Here's a stomach. Here's there we go. Here's the small intestine. Okay, that'll get us started. And what I see here is this big red guy. This big red guy right here. I see him coming through the diaphragm right here as well. That big red guy is my descending abdominal aorta. And the very first branch that we care about coming off the descending abdominal aorta is this short artery right here. Kind of short, kind of wide. That short artery right there is known as the celiac artery. That's called the celiac artery. It is sometimes called the celiac trunk, but that is my celiac artery. Now, my celiac, 3 syllables, 3 branches. The branches include my hepatic artery. So I'm going to have a hepatic artery. Branches include my left gastric artery. So there is my left gastric, if I can spell, artery. And the branches also include my personal favorite, the splenic artery. So those are the 3 branches of my celiac artery. All right, let's get rid of all that. And let's keep on going. So if I look at this, I see my abdominal aorta in its entirety right here. Such a lovely looking vessel. And I see my celiac artery again. Look how short that celiac artery is. Boom, right there. So there's my celiac artery again. Let's type celiac. There we go. I see its 3 branches. I'm not going to label them in this picture because I don't have the organs to where they're going. I mean, we could label them, but it just, let's keep going. Let's keep going. Where was I? Check out this guy right here. This guy who is kind of underneath the celiac artery. That guy right there is known as my superior mesenteric artery. It is going to feed my small intestine, S for superior, S for small intestine, and some of the large intestine as well. Now, if there's a superior mesenteric, notice if I go a little farther down, emanating from the front surface of the aorta, I am going to have an inferior mesenteric artery, feeding the large intestine as well as some of the small. Now, what else can I see here? Lots and lots of wonderful stuff. Let's get rid of those labels. There we go. And I do see my adrenal glands here. So feeding my adrenal gland, I'm going to have an adrenal or suprarenal artery. So adrenal or suprarenal artery right there. Supra, above, renal, kidney. Ad in this case means next to, renal means kidney. Now, speaking of the kidney, here's a kidney, here's a kidney, and right there I have the artery feeding my kidney. That is a renal artery. Notice while there were not rights and lefts for the celiac and the mesenterics, there are rights and lefts for the renals. I also see a trio of arteries, right here, a trio of arteries, bum, bum, bum. And those arteries, you can think about them as feeding the lower back, and because they are feeding the lower back, we are going to call them the lumbar arteries. Fantastic. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, I want to do another set of branches of my abdominal aorta. This guy here and this guy here, right and left. These guys are my, oops, let's undo that. I don't want an arrow there, I want a letter. Those guys right there are the gonadal arteries. Now, if we know the gender of the sex of the person, we can call them the testicular or ovarian arteries. If we can't tell, like in this picture here, we just use the word gonadal. Okie dokie. We are just about done with this abdomen. Right around the belly button level, around the top of the hips, check out those iliac bones there. We see the abdominal aorta splitting. When it splits, we get a pair of arteries. Let's label one of them right here. That is a common iliac artery. So we have a common iliac artery right there. And of course, the word common tells me that it is going to split. So let's slide down to the next picture. Oh, I forgot about this picture. What I really see nicely in this picture is my superior and inferior. So here's my superior. There we go. There's my superior. And there's my inferior mesenteric arteries. Also see my celiac artery right there. He's cut before we can show the branches. And we can just see how the mesenterics are feeding the large intestine here, and they've removed the small intestine, but there's going to be so many branches to feed it as well. Okay. And while we're here, let's check out that common iliac artery. Right there. And what we can see in this picture is how the common iliac artery is going to split. There's the split right there. And it's giving us an external iliac artery on the lateral side, the outside, and an internal iliac artery going more medially. Think about the internal iliac artery as feeding the pelvic organs, urinary, reproductive stuff. External is going to go into the thigh and continue onward down into that lower limb. Let's figure out where it goes. All right. So starting up top, there's my descending abdominal aorta. There's my right common iliac artery. There's my right internal iliac artery. There's my right external iliac artery, which is becoming my right femoral artery. So here is a new one for us, femoral. Now the femoral artery eventually dives behind the knee. And when it dives behind the knee, excuse me, it becomes the popliteal artery. Lovely, lovely. Okay, so let's get rid of all that. And let's jump down. We switched to the back here. Here's the back of the knee. Back of the knee. And of course, back of the knee is popliteal. There's our popliteal artery. Popliteal artery is going to give off 3 branches that we care about, including the anterior tibial, the posterior tibial, and the fibular. We see the posterior tibial and the fibular giving off some arches to our plantar surface in the bottom of our foot. Let's spin this leg around. If I spin this leg around, I see my anterior tibial artery snaking right there, becoming the dorsalis pedis artery. That's that pulse you can feel right in the front top of the foot. And yeah, that, folks, just about does it for arteries of the body. Hopefully I didn't miss any. If I did, I apologize. And with that, I will say, see you later. Bye.